It's been over a decade since the last Half-Life game. Until recently, that is. While all of us have been posting our memes and wondering if there will ever be a Half-Life 3, Valve has been working on Source 2, and in turn, the next installment in the Half-Life series, Half-Life Alyx. This game, however, isn't a continuation of the Half-Life story. This is a prequel of sorts, taking place in between Half-Life 1 and 2. While that may be the case, I wouldn't suggest playing it until you've played the rest. In anticipation for Half-Life Alyx, I actually went and played the first two Half-Life games on my own. And even though I wasn't really on the bandwagon for the series, I've kind of found a newfound respect for the Half-Life games as a whole. What the fuck are you doing in my video? So let's get on with the review. For those who have been living under a rock since the announcement of Half-Life Alyx, this game is made for VR headsets. And while virtual reality can be a bit pricey, especially with Valve's headset The Index costing upwards of $1,000 for the bundle, as well as having to own a powerful enough PC to run the game, it's quite an investment. But people have claimed that Half-Life Alyx is the game VR needs to propel itself into the mainstream. I've been sold on the idea of virtual reality, however. I've never had a PC to get a proper headset, but mostly I've been playing on the PlayStation VR since 2017. Until around December of 2019. But I've seen what VR is capable of before then, and I've played on a wide variety of headsets since before getting my own. And I was for sure invested in VR since the beginning. But this begs the question, is Half-Life Alyx the killer app VR needs, or is it just another shallow VR experience that's worth watching someone play on YouTube? I'm here to answer that question. So the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to VR games is graphical fidelity. For the sake of knowing what I'm using to play the game, I'm playing on an RTX 2060 Super and an Oculus Rift S. And holy cow, this game looks fantastic! The textures are clean, the shadows are amazing, and the character models look impressive and animated in comparison to previous Half-Life games.
Alyx! How's it looking up there?
It's good, Dad. Metrocop movement is normal. Same for the Combine patrols. How's it going in the stockyard?
One Combine mini reactor from a shipment of 4,000. They're never going to miss it. Here, see for yourself.
And not only that, someone's hacked into the Combine construction network.
Got rid of that pest. Certainly not. Never fear, Gordon. She's debeaked and completely harmless. The worst she might do is attempt to couple with your head, fruitlessly.
Get that thing away from me!
Here, my pet. Hop up. No, not up there. No, no. Careful, Lamar. Those are quite fragile. Oh, fie.
The engine that the game runs on, which is the new Source 2 engine, is very impressive with everything it sets out to achieve. Going through City 17 really makes you feel like Half-Life Alyx. Needless to say, with the updated models comes updated enemies, and the Combine look even cooler in the new engine. And the headcrab zombies are back too, as well as the headcrabs. And when it comes to headcrabs, I don't miss. Now, I do want to point out that this is a massive upgrade for VR graphics. A lot of VR games don't have amazing graphics in their games. Doesn't mean that they aren't fun. I've punched a few walls in Blade and Sorcery, despite it not looking like the newest AAA game. And there's not a lot of AAA devs working on VR titles. PlayStation has titles like Blood and Truth and Astrobot Rescue Mission, which are both fantastic games, despite the fact that they're PlayStation exclusives. Maybe with Horizon Zero Dawn coming to PC, we'll see some of their VR titles show up. But for now, you need a PSVR and a PS4 to play the majority of these games. The only other AAA company wanting to make VR games is Valve, with the occasional game from Ubisoft. Valve has also made some little VR experiences with Aperture Science as the backdrop, but those are basically just tech demos to show how good the index is as well as what VR is capable of. Now, graphics are all good, but you're here to find out how the game plays. And I'm happy to tell you that it plays smooth like butter. Picking things up is extremely fun with the gravity gloves, called the Russells in the game, as they're made by the character of the same name.
Oh, wait! I almost forgot!
Alyx, up here! You're gonna need a gun! Don't worry, it's unloaded. It's unloaded now!
It's really simple and easy to use, and there was a moment or two where I flung something in my hand that I didn't want to, or it just didn't work, but it was so inconsistent that it didn't matter. Handling guns is fun as well. Everything feels like a little minigame. Reloading guns in a firefighter while fighting headcrab zombies is intense. Hacking combine fabricators or completing wire puzzles is fun. Although, I may just be short, but I had a hard time in some sections because the multi-tool was too far away from the wall to read the wires. While we do have all this amazing and intuitive gameplay that makes doing everything fun, I do feel as if this was a little bare bones. Your smooth locomotion speed is a tad too slow, but not slow enough to make it unbearable. The jumping in the game is resorted to teleporting, which, if you're someone like me who has to be as immersed as possible until punching a wall, it kinda takes you out of the experience. The mantling in the game is fine for immersion and should have been similar with the smooth locomotion for jumping, but jumping up to things is only relegated to teleporting. And even I had a little Dean Takahashi moment in the beginning because I didn't know you had to pull back on the stick to jump.
They're taking it.
Criminal holding. And then, when they realize he's Eli Vance, to Nova Prospect. But I'm already working on a plan to get him back. You're close to my lab. Keep following the drone. We'll figure out what to do.
Russell, what did you guys find back there?
Well, that's the crazy thing. I don't know. Just blurry pictures of a building.
The Citadel?
No, something else. And whatever it is, they're gonna kill anybody who saw it. And anybody who knows anybody who saw it. Which means us and your dad.
Russell, just hang on. I'm almost there.
I was going to mention that I played most of the game with snap turning because smooth turning wasn't an option, but I'm happy to say that it's there now, so that's nice. Physics in the game are phenomenal, except when you're messing around with the Combine. During some fights you can see items on the Combine which you can loot on certain occasions for more ammo, grenades, and other items to aid Alyx on her journey. But for some reason, sometimes the loot you see won't be there. Also, the Combine are glued to the floor once they die, so moving them is kind of difficult. You can climb ladders if you want, and when falling off a ledge, you kind of hover down, which is unfortunate, but I understand what they're going for. And that's because VR, like beer, is an acquired taste. Oh, thank you. You gotta get your legs in VR before dealing with things like vertigo and motion sickness, so implementing stuff like teleportation and snap turning, and sometimes in other games, vignettes, is important so that someone who doesn't play VR as much as the guys who've been playing since the Oculus dev kit can enjoy the game to its fullest potential. The options make the game accessible, so it's good for people who are new to VR. Me, on the other hand, turn that shit off. I want nothing to do with it. But now that we've covered the gameplay, let's delve into the story. After playing Half-Life 1 and 2, a big question on my mind was, does Half-Life Alyx feel like a Half-Life game? And the answer is yes. The writing is fantastic, but don't think you're going to understand it if you've never played a Half-Life game. As Alyx takes place between 1 and 2, you'd play it after Half-Life 1 chronologically, But what the game wants you to do is it wants you to play it after you've played Episode 2, because it mentions happenings in Half-Life 2 in the episodes in the game. So if you've not played Half-Life 2 and the episodes, or you don't have a grasp on the events of the story, I would suggest playing those games first, because you won't know a darn thing that's going on. So while I'm going to delve into a little bit of spoiler territory, if you've not played the game, or you don't want parts of the Half-Life story explained to you, then skip to this time in the video where I talk about immersion factor. Got it? Good. So Half-Life Alyx lets you play as Alyx, which is no surprise being the fact that it's in the damn name of the game. Alyx, unlike Gordon, has working vocal cords, so she always has something to say.
Terrific. Yep, they got the reactor. Easy peasy. Oh, gross. What is that? I see it. Damn it.
This is probably the biggest change in the story formula for the series. I say story formula because I'm not talking about the mechanics of the game, I'm talking about the writing of the story. Alyx is tasked with recon from her dad Eli, and she's currently coming back from doing that in the beginning of the game.
Meet back at the safe house, baby. We'll be there soon.
It looks like...
What is it, Russell?
Would you... Terrific.
We get to see a lot of City 17 as well as talk to some people who are involved with the Resistance, which is really cool. They're fleshing out the world, but it's not as in-depth as Half-Life 2 as they expect you to play those games first. Alyx makes it back to the safe house where Eli is held up in, but oh no! The Combine are here, and they capture both Eli and Alyx. Lucky for Alyx, she makes it out and reconnects with another person from the Resistance, Russell.
Alyx, great! Okay, let's... Wait, my drone's okay, right?
Nope, it exploded. I'm fine, by the way.
He gives Alyx the gravity gloves and a pistol which can be upgraded into the Alyx gun, and Alyx makes her way through City 17 and into the quarantine zone to save her dad. I'll leave the rest for you to figure out, or if you want to see me run through the game again on hard mode, keep your eyes out on this channel as I've either started streaming it or I will be streaming it in the near future. So let's talk about something that should always be mentioned when reviewing VR games: immersion factor. How well does this game work to trick you into believing you're in the world? And by that, I mean, how high did my heart rate raise when I went into the sewers and had to fight head crabs in the dark?
5 different continents. It was the most impossible food item you could imagine.
Get away!
In any age
Get
before.
away!
Well, the game doesn't mess around with a HUD or anything like that, for the person playing. What you're seeing on the screen is what's called spectator mode, and it allows you to see everything that I would see in the game in the form of a HUD that looks like your average Half-Life game. I check my health and my ammo and all of my items on my hands. The Alyx gun has a bullet counter on the side of the weapon, as well as the shotgun having an ammo counter on the back. And your total ammo is labeled under your health, which is on your offhand in the form of 3 hearts. And anything you put in your inventory shows up as holograms on your wrists. The puzzles in the game take place in the real world as holograms, and you have your resin count, which takes place of the ammo counter on your hand when you aren't holding a weapon. The game holds conversations during stressful encounters that aren't major story beats to entice players to keep going. And if it wasn't for Russell talking about club sandwiches, I probably would have put the game down in the extremely dark and scary section of the game.
Ah, excellent. Alyx, have you ever heard of a club sandwich?
Nope, not once.
Right. To make a club sandwich, you need to start with bread. Not from a bread line, from a bakery across the street. Baked that day, okay? You add tomatoes, lettuce, not vegetable paste, fresh. Then you add bacon. That's from an animal we used to call the pig.
The game also doesn't needlessly give you things to hold on to or put in your inventory. The only things you have to worry about is your ammo, resin, health items, and the occasional battery to proceed. However, the game implores you to explore by placing resin in all sorts of places. You can find it in lockers, on shelves in corners, behind bars, and even in dumpsters. The resin glows too, so spotting it from far away is really easy, but finding enough to upgrade your weapons is a reward all on its own. And I haven't mentioned it before, but resin is the main item that Alyx uses to upgrade her weapons. And speaking of weapons, all of the weapons are made to be held with one hand. But you can place both hands together to steady your aim, or when in the dark, you can attach the flashlight to your gun. All weapons have a laser sight, and some of them have upgrades similar to weapons in the original Half-Life games, like the double shot for the shotgun or the grenade launcher. I never felt taken out of the game, except for the occasional instance where I found myself accidentally sticking my head through a wall, but that's par for the course in a VR game. Your hands don't phase through the world either like in older VR games, so anything you touch stops your hand, which is really cool. Another thing I wanted to mention was length, though. I didn't think about this until I mentioned my playtime to other funny internet man, Ren's Reviews. He mentioned that he beat the game in double my time, which I took 8 hours to beat it. Ren's time was around the reported length of the game, although he did explore more than me, even though I had plenty of resin to get the upgrades that I wanted. Maybe I just play games fast, but if that's not a testament to how invested I was in the game, then I don't know what is. Now, before we wrap this video up, there's one more thing I want to mention, and that is possible sequels. Not a big surprise, but the game alludes to a possible Half-Life VR sequel involving Gordon Freeman, which isn't much of a spoiler, as I know that a handful of you would have seen this coming. It's no surprise that Valve is heavily invested in VR tech, and I personally think that VR could become a genre of its own. I don't think it'll replace our current methods of entertainment, but I think it will become big enough to be its own thing. But I have some thoughts on a possible Half-Life Gordon. I don't know if the current mechanics can support a Gordon Freeman story. Alyx is limited to 3 guns in the game, which are all unique and work for her because of her character. Gordon has a couple more guns than Alyx, as well as the fact that Gordon deals with two-handed weapons. Now, I don't know about you, but from some of the VR games I play, two-handed guns are not the easiest to control. Not being able to hold a physical weapon with both of your hands makes handling something like the shotgun strange because your hands are disconnected. Now, this may sound like a nitpick, but I promise there's some merit to what I'm talking about. Another thing that Alyx doesn't do with the game is melee. Gordon always has a crowbar, and if they use the mechanics from Alyx in a VR game starring Gordon, well, we wouldn't be able to use that crowbar. But I'm not saying that Valve's next Half-Life game will include a tiny shotgun-wielding crowbarless Gordon. I'm saying that if Valve wants another VR Half-Life game with Gordon Freeman, they're gonna have to make sure that they do it right. And the closest thing we have to a Gordon-styled VR Half-Life game is BONEWORKS by Stress Level 0. BONEWORKS is a fantastic game, and it's near perfect mechanically, but it's not there yet. Handling a crowbar in BONEWORKS is tricky, and you can't swing it with one hand and expect to bean a guy in the head instantly. The crowbar is heavy, so you have to hold it with 2 hands. Unfortunately, trying to find that perfect speed to whack someone with it is difficult. Swing too slow, it rolls off the enemy. Swing too fast, it also rolls off the enemy. And since you have nothing stopping you in real life, that inertia coming from the crowbar is going to go into your hands. And that full swing that you did to the guy's side, that force is in your hands. So the crowbar just kind of twists in your hands and rubs up against the guy, not doing any damage. And this happens a lot in VR, but if we're talking Half-Life, Valve already has a solution. Make the crowbar weightless and wieldable with one hand. Someone might say that's unrealistic, and you're right. But not to Gordon, because he has one thing that we don't.
Welcome to the HEV Mark IV Protective System.
A suit that makes Gordon very strong and very fast. The crowbar now becomes as light as a stick to Gordon, and that could fix some of the melee issues. Although, I don't know what Valve could do with Gordon and the two-handed weapons thing. So, Valve is going to have to work hard to make sure that this VR game starring Gordon Freeman actually works. So, what do I think of Half-Life Alyx? I'd say play it. If you want a good story and fun gameplay, and you also have a willingness to conquer your fear of spiders, I'd say that Half-Life Alyx is the game for you. Is it the killer VR app that we were hoping for? Sort of? I think that it's a piece of a pie. And there's 3 games that I bought PC VR for. Half-Life Alyx for the story, and the quality and gunplay, BONEWORKS for the mechanics of physics, and Blade and Sorcery for the melee combat. Each game brings something unique to VR users, and I think that each game is worth getting a VR headset for. I could talk all day about it, but the truth is that watching someone play VR and playing it yourself are two very different things. There's a lot about watching VR that gets lost in translation, such as 3D audio and haptic feedback from the controllers, as well as being immersed in a 3D environment, not being able to see what lies outside of your headset. But if you want to get the complete VR experience, I would say pick all three of them up. They're all worth every penny. Although I don't think that this is worth getting an index for. So if you're not set on dropping the $1,000 on an index, I'd say try out the Rift S, which is much easier to set up and goes for a fraction of the price. You get a near identical experience at the cost of being unable to flip the bird.